Colm Flynn is the Vatican correspondent for the Catholic News Network, and he joins us now live from Rome at this solemn time. Colm, the process that is going to be playing out, we'll get to that in a moment, but how would you describe the papacy that has just ended?
Well, I always say that the papacy is in the eye of a beholder. You know, there are some that celebrated the life and the papacy of Pope Francis, others who condemned it. But I can tell you for certain that this news has come as a shock to all of us. I was there in St. Peter's Square yesterday for the celebration of the beautiful Easter Sunday Mass with all the flowers from the Netherlands adorning St. Peter's Basilica, celebrated by a cardinal, of course, not by Pope Francis. But at the end of the Mass, the crowds chanted, "Viva el Papa, Viva el Papa." And sure enough, the curtains of the main balcony of St. Peter's Basilica opened up, and out came Pope Francis, looking weaker and vulnerable because of his battle with recent double pneumonia, but he managed to say two sentences. He said, "Brothers and sisters, good morning, and I wish you a happy Easter." You know, this papacy, right from the beginning, has been completely different because he has been a pope of firsts. Obviously, the first from Latin America, the first Jesuit, but then the first to try and take a more simplistic approach to the papacy. He wanted to reject many of the formalities. Again, something that was celebrated by some, and others said, what? The tradition, the beauty, the symbolism behind each of these things that maybe you are pushing to the side. But, you know, take, for example, his first papal trip after becoming Pope in 2013. He could have went to one of the world's great cathedrals. He could have went to a wealthy Catholic country, but instead he went to the island of Lampedusa off the coast of Italy, where the migrants wash up when they're making their journey from North Africa into Europe. He went there to express his closeness to those migrants, and that really was one of the thrusting points of his entire papacy, being there for people on the margins. He travelled the world. I was lucky to go with him to places like Mongolia, South Sudan, Iraq, even countries where there were very little Catholic populations, sometimes even no Catholics whatsoever. But with Pope Francis, when he saw the pain and suffering in others, when he saw there was a need, he wanted to be there. And, you know, he took the name Francis, St. Francis of Assisi, a saint known for his devotion to a life of poverty and of simplicity and of being close to nature. And, you know, he would often say, preach the gospel and, if necessary, use words. And really, that's what Pope Francis did for the past 12 years or so. Gestures every day, showing his commitment to the poor and those on the margins.
Colm, the proximity that you've had to him professionally and whether you've been able to garner personal insights, give me an idea about behind closed door man, about what he would do in his private time. Was he a person who was constantly having the deepest of conversations about faith, or was he the type of person who we may be surprised about some of the things which took his attention when he had a moment to himself?
Yeah, I don't want to elaborate my closeness to him. I did meet him on a number of occasions, and travelling with him to these countries, you would get an opportunity to meet him on the papal flight. That was always the beautiful thing. When you were flying to a certain country, he would come back and greet you, each journalist individually. You'd have a moment to say hello and exchange a few words. But you know what was very special, actually? My wife and I, we recently got married a few months ago, and, you know, every Wednesday the Pope would have his general audience where he would greet the public. But if you had just recently been married, you could get up close to the front. And because we both work at the Vatican as journalists, we had our press cards. So 2 days before he was hospitalised, I went to his final general audience. My wife and I got right up to the front, and we got to speak to him for a couple of moments. He signed his book for us. He gave us an image of the Blessed Family, and then I just exchanged a few words about being on the trips with him. But, you know, he's a complex figure. And, you know, that is not to say that no pope is not complex. But I think Pope Francis, you know, you look at Pope Benedict XVI, he was a theologian. He was a deep thinker. He was a lecturer. That's the world he came from. Pope Francis was more about the gestures, stopping the Pope Mobile to bless a baby, to embrace someone who was sick, washing the feet of the prisoners. He liked more of those moments and those symbolic gestures, I think, and I think that's what the world will remember him for. But of course, I did have many moments with him in the Papal Palace and on the trips. Nice, I would call them cordial greetings.
Beautifully said. As a person of deep faith who doesn't just commit professionally, but obviously personally, this moment for you, this moment as a Catholic, what does it mean for those of us who, in my case, I don't share the faith, but I deeply respect the faith? What does this moment mean? I don't seek for you to speak on the behalf of a billion people, but perhaps just yourself and your wife.
You know what? I'm going to speak on behalf of 1.4 billion people. No, you know what? Of course, there's great sadness in a moment like this. The feeling that I had this morning when I woke up and speaking to my wife, it felt like a grandfather had passed. There was just that kind of shock, like a family member had passed away. Again, as I have said, covering this, there are people who really celebrated his papacy, others confused by bits of it. That will all be debated in weeks and months to come. But now on the day of his passing, I think the thing to remember is, it's all about Easter. Just think about this. He passed away the day after Easter, and he gave a speech yesterday. Even though he couldn't speak, he had written a 20-minute speech which he handed to the Master of Ceremonies to read. And it's actually extremely poignant that he passed away just after this, his last message to the world. Because in it, while he called for peace and an end to conflict in places like Ukraine and the Middle East and so on, he said, today is all about the Easter message. Jesus is alive and Jesus is real. He said, he's not in the tomb. We look for him in the tomb, but the tomb is empty. He is among us. He is in the face of others. He said, today is a day when light has won over darkness, when good has triumphed over evil, truth has won over falsehoods. That was the message that he gave, the last message to the world before he passed away. It's sad that he passed. It is a terrible thing that we will mourn, but this is the tapestry of life, and now we will have the conclave and his successor, and the Catholic faith goes on.
As you speak to the conclave, there are 252 living cardinals amongst us and spread across the world. Those under the age of 80 will enter and make the choice of the next pope. That's 135 of them. Give us an idea about how that group of cardinals has been shaped by this pope. Will the conclave essentially be in the model of the pope that has just passed, or many, of course, who Benedict perhaps had put in place? Give us an idea of the ideological sense of those 135 that will be making their choice.
Yeah, for sure. The ideological split now, it really has leaned more towards Pope Francis, as he has elected more cardinals than any pope in recent history, which, you know, if you look at it from an earthly point of view, and the Catholic Church is, of course, an institution, we believe a link to the divine, but it is not divine, as we too well know. It is a humanly institution. So if you were a betting man, you would say, well, the odds are increased that the next pope, the successor, will be someone who shares in the beliefs, the emphasis and the styles of Pope Francis. But you know, they have a great saying here in Italy, in that when you go into the conclave of Pope as a hot favourite, you come back out a humble cardinal, because we believe the Holy Spirit is in charge. And while they have favourites, there's another saying in Rome here where they say, fat pope, skinny pope, fat pope, skinny pope. So it leans conservative, it goes back liberal, it leans conservative. So you just have to wait and see. Look, Pope Benedict XVI had a much different style. Although really, when you read the teachings, a lot of the teachings of Pope Francis and Benedict, they're actually very similar, but the emphasis was different, the tone was different. So Pope Francis was a big change in that tone and a shift in style of this papacy. Many people say right pope at the right time, when scandals were engulfing the church around the world. So we'll have to see what this papacy will be. But I can tell you what, you mentioned Conclave, and yes, you were right, ludicrous moments throughout the film, but a lot of truth in it as well, in terms of politics and people forming alliances. You know, the politics will be in play, but here's what we know. In the past, many of the cardinals, in fact, all of them, were all Italian and they were European. So they all had a sense of each other. They knew each other. When it came time to a conclave, they kind of had a favourite. Now, because Pope Francis wanting to represent those in the margins, he has picked a cardinal in, for example, South Sudan, one in Mongolia, which is great because it represents the universality and the true diversity of the Catholic faith. A lot of these people don't know each other. So when it comes time to vote in the conclave, yes, they'll hear each other make their pre-conclave speeches, but they'll be saying, well, can I vote for this person? Do I really know what they're about and what they stand for? Can we put the papacy in their hands? So we think this could be a slightly longer papacy, a bit more complicated than usual, but we'll have to wait and see.
Colm, I'm sorry these are the circumstances that we meet, but a pleasure to talk to you. We could listen to your accent all night, and thank you for your insights. They are detailed and a man of faith. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All the best.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.